Warning: the subject matter of the following stories featured in this video contain mature content. Viewer discretion is advised. r/askreddit. What's your I finally met my online friend horror story?
I am an artist, and my main job before the one I have now was selling my work at comic, anime, and video game cons across the US and Canada, and sometimes in more countries. It was surprisingly a lucrative job if you did it right, and I enjoyed it, and required a lot more work than people realized. But I digress. The point is I was familiar with the convention scene, and this leads me to my next point. I used to take commissions at conventions, but I stopped doing them years ago because I got too busy and my art had improved enough that $100 felt too low for my skill level, and I'm all about artists pricing their work fairly and not working for pennies. A couple of years ago, just as I had started phasing out commission work, a man had approached me at a con. You get a lot of socially awkward people at cons, to be expected, but 99.5% of them are really sweet and just like to talk about stuff they dig. If you have a good amount of patience, it's enjoyable. But this guy, he immediately asked me if I did commissions. I said no. Unfortunately not anymore. He asked me how much my prices were, and usually when people ask I just quote some arbitrary high number just to get them to throw out the idea without outright telling them no. And if they want to pay it, well, then we can talk. I said $350. He said, cool, done. In cash? I was stammering at him, not expecting him to go for it. Eventually I just asked him what he wanted. To make a long story shorter, he wanted furry art. Softcore porn to be exact. I had never in my life done furry art, but I knew how lucrative it seemed to be. I said oh, each character would be extra. NSFW would be extra too. This would be a big commission. He's like, oh no worries. How much extra? This went back and forth for a while, and to save time, he paid me $700, in cash, on the spot, for some furry porn. I wasn't even mad. $700 is nice, so I said sure, I'll draw the furry porn. What do I care? I'll fake sign it, it's one and done. After I did it, and one night in my hotel room, I found he had taken my business card and had given my email to his friends who may be interested in commissioning art. The requests were weirder and weirder, but the pay stayed surprisingly good. Eventually, I ended up making a Fur Affinity account under a fake name and tweaked my style and techniques enough that no one could ever trace the art back to me. I decided to just fully embrace the furry art bank life. It was open season. I guarantee you I was a no-name in the community and still made good money, so I'm horrified to think what the really popular artists get. I didn't feel ashamed for drawing weird furry fetish porn, nor did I feel bad for kinda being a fraud. I provided a service, and that was it. Things went downhill when I mistakenly befriended someone in the community. She was another furry artist, and we just sort of hit it off in the online community. She seemed like an edgy self-hating furry, so our jabbing humor at the expense of furries made us bond. She was cool, all was well. Eventually I admitted to her that I didn't actually give a shit about furries, and she took it in stride. Said she understood why I used the community to make money because she wished she wasn't a fucking furry either, but you can't help what you like. She told me that if I really wanted to make bank, I should go to a furry convention. I was immediately like, fuck no. Never in my life, but she told me about an anime con that I regularly attended that next year would be sharing the same venue and weekend as a furry convention. Just table hop, she said. She told me to split her table with her, try it out, see how I fared. I already had a table at the anime con, so I was like sure, why the hell not? What could it hurt? We decided to even share a hotel room. This isn't uncommon. In artist tallies, many artists room share together since we have similar schedules and don't tend to party hard because we are working. She seemed like a good person, and it's not uncommon to just meet someone when you're rooming with them. I arrived Thursday before the con, but the furry con had already started. I got a text from my friend to come sit at her table in the furry con dealer's den for a few hours since my con didn't start until Friday, just to see if it clicked. She had already checked into the hotel room and had the keys anyways, so I picked up my badge and went. I was surprised to find her at the table, in full fursuit. They was the weird part. She was a self-hating furry, or so she claimed, so to go full commitment and be in a suit was okay. I was already out of my comfort zone in the sea of furries, and my friend was supposed to be like my anchor, my guide through this other world to protect me from this shit. I was immediately on edge. It got worse when I sat down and introduced myself and she did that thing. That thing that furries do where they are in fursuits and don't talk. She nodded when I made sure she was who I thought she was. But she just did the overly exaggerated cute poses and even had a fucking squeaky toy in her fursuit to make noise. But she didn't say a word. She hugged me, and somehow, managed to interact with customers who all knew her and adored her. I guess she was well known in the community, and if she wanted to communicate, would write or text in this big ass all things. She said she hates wearing suits, but because she doesn't have to talk in them, she doesn't have to interact much with customers. Okay. That I could kinda maybe believe. Sort of. At around 7 p.m. we packed up to leave to go to the hotel room. She stayed in suit the whole way up. In the room I flopped down on my bed exhausted. I asked her if she was going to come out of that thing, understandably a little freaked out from this whole thing. Then she did the thing that made me want to run out of the room, which I didn't against my better judgment. I had flopped on the bed with the upper half of my body, my feet still on the floor, my shirt had ridden up my torso. She stepped in between my legs and fucking tickled me on my exposed belly. I flipped the fuck out, as one does when sneak attacked by tickles, and wriggled out of her reach. She made that laughing pose that furries do where they hold their paws to their mouths bashfully but still silent as fuck. I was so creeped out. My go-to way of handling stress like that is laughing it off nervously. She got the hint and motioned she was going to get a shower. As soon as she was in the shower I decided I didn't want to be there when she got out, for now. But instead of lugging all my stuff I decided I would come back for it, preferably with friends. But I needed a key, so I went to her wallet she had taken out of one of her suit pockets, and tried to find the keys I had seen her slip into her wallet. And of course as soon as I opened it I just had to see her ID. I just had to, I was too curious not to. And when I opened it I looked at the ID slot and I flipped. My shit. Whoever was in that ID was not in any way who I was expecting to see on the picture. I didn't know the super personal details of my friend besides her name and age and general descriptive factors. Mid-20s, white girl, etc. That was not who was on this ID. It was a man, with long greasy hair, glasses, and stubble, in his mid-40s or early 50s I'd wager. I was so fucking shocked that I literally threw the wallet across the room after grabbing a key and ran the fuck out of that hotel room. I took 15 flights of stairs down to the lobby and called up a friend who was coming to the con freaking out. I never saw the real person under the suit. My friend, a tall burly scary looking dude, went up for my stuff later that night with the key I'd grabbed. When he came back with all my things, he said there was no one in the room. I stayed with him in his room that weekend, and kept only to the convention. My friend didn't have a badge to get into unless I was with a group outside of it. The next night I deleted my Furaffinity account, blocked my friend on my chat app, and deleted every connection I had to the furry world. The money be damned. I would never venture into that mess again. To this day, that event still makes me sweat, man. I have some really awful, funny, and silly con stories from my time as a traveling con artist, and this and one other incident top the list as the worst trademark. I have still not recovered. And that was how I almost became like the op in the image, but got out just in time, I hope, before anything terrible happened. Doctor, I got catfished by a furry and probably almost became a victim of some sort. all over furry art and my greed for that good furry money. It's not worth it. Don't do it, friends. I don't want to mention con names and stuff, but if you googled furry and anime con happens at same hotel, I'm sure you can find the magical con this happened at. Met this dude on EverQuest and we've played games together ever since. Been a part of the same guild, help each other out on mobile games, and have conversations about life in general. It isn't him that's the horror story, it was his mom. So one day, I think we were playing WoW at the time, I log on to do some quests. Suddenly his user comes on and asks to chat by video. We've done this before and there's no problem, but after I click to start the video chat, there's his mom butt naked on the screen. She asks me to watch her masturbate and I'm like, no lady, this is just awkward F, and I log off for a few days. I get an email from my friend and he wants to know why I haven't shown up for quests or anything. So I tell him what happened and he is seriously like, WTF? Turns out his mom had been doing this to a lot of his online buddies and she eventually goes to prison for raping a minor or two. Buddy's doing great though, wife and kids, plus we still play the occasional game together. I met a guy online, we really got on and he came over a few times so we could hang out. I did find him attractive and tried to hint that I was into him. Note, I can't flirt to save my life, but nothing ever happened. After a few dates he suddenly vanished offline. No social media, he wasn't answering texts or emails, nothing. I thought he'd ghosted me. After 6 months he reappears. I asked him where he'd been and he said I don't want to talk about it. A few weeks after, there was a fad where people were googling their names and posting humorous stories they had found about similar people with their name. Mine was about a ship that had my initials, and I started to Google friends' names just out of boredom, morbid curiosity, Googled his name and found a local news story from his area, one of those crime and courts things that he had been done for statutory rape of a minor, online grooming, and had his computer and phone seized as evidence. He and I were part of the same forum many years ago. He was dealing with his issues and I was dealing with mine. I think we both went there to escape, where people wouldn't judge. Also, because we were bored. I'm not quite sure when we got properly talking. I think it's when he told a terrible joke about kipper ties. We used to share everything with each other, over MSN. I'd give him advice about his love life and he'd listen to all my fuck-ups. It took quite a few fuck-ups before we eventually met up. I think I already knew we were in love, but seeing him in person really cemented it. We decided to give it a go, even though we lived 300 miles away from each other. We had a lot of ups and downs. I was distant, he lived with his ex-girlfriend for a bit even though she didn't have a job and couldn't afford her half of the rent. The same ex-GF who I'd given him advice on, who he had nicknamed Trouble and liked to claim she was pregnant every so often. We got over that, along with many other things, and finally moved in with each other. I thought our issues were gonna be solved when there was no distance between us. Ends up, we were just very different people who wanted very different things and the distance wasn't gonna change that. We broke up after 3.5 years together. None of that's the horror story. Not the way he treated me, not the fact he probably cheated on me, not that I wasn't a priority and used to cry myself to sleep. About 1.5 years after breaking up, he gets back in touch and we talk like it was in the beginning, when we were friends. After a few weeks, he asked if I want to get back together. I said no. I told him that he'd broken my heart again. The next day, I got a phone call from his work because I was still his emergency contact asking me if I knew where he was because he hasn't turned up. The police got in touch too. The last phone call that day was from his mom, to let me know that he'd killed himself. I, 25, was best friends with a woman, 46, for nearly 6 years. We would talk for hours and send each other gifts constantly. We shared everything from art to personal trauma. We were very close. When I fell in hard times, she was very kind and offered to take me in. I was so grateful that she would do this for me. After a few months, things started to change. I started to see why she was such a lonely person. She was mean, if not cruel, to anyone who ever disagreed with her or even had a different opinion. She was so mentally unstable that she couldn't even buy something without having to call her elderly mother and ask for permission. I found out that she was scamming the disability services to get money from the government because she didn't want her mother tracking her spending. She was so horrible to her caregiver. I'll admit that the guy was a complete moron, but he was still a sweet guy that was just trying to help. She was so abusive towards him that I had to step in on multiple occasions, which she fucking hated because it meant I wasn't on her side. That's when she turned on me. She began to freak out over small stuff. Screaming and crying because I missed a spot while mopping or because I spilled a little bit of water in the kitchen or ate my food too fast. She was fucking insane. As soon as I realized how messed up and unstable she was, after being screamed at and chased back to my room, I told her that I was going to be moving out as soon as possible. So, for the next week, she decided to make my life a living hell. She would scream about me to other people on the phone, telling lies about me, saying I did things I never did. And because she was a YouTuber with a big following, she doxed me on social media, telling people I punched holes in her walls and keyed her car. She even called the cops and tried to get me arrested for things I didn't do. Her followers began to harass me, sending me rape, death threats. Then she started posting and sharing all of my personal secrets that I had shared with her in confidence. I ended up having to call my family to come get me because she was wanting to keep my dog so that I would have to keep in contact with her and I was no longer feeling safe. So, after 6 months of living in hell and 3 years of internet harassment and stalking that followed, I'll never meet someone I met online ever again. I have no interest in online friends. It's not safe because you never know how absolutely fucked up someone is until it's too late. Some parting words from CookBoss88 before we end this video.
Having friends from long-distance places is an amazing thing to have. However, there are also people out there who prey on the naive and innocent, those who target other people for insidious motives. Be wary of these people. Be alert. Be careful. This has been CookBoss88
and Ren the Robo Wolf.
Stay safe, my fellow degenerates.